Just a huge round of applause, please. They're awesome. They produce epic, awesome. And then I probably shouldn't say too much about HackDC since that might be a conflict of interest. And in this country now, only a year after this talk was first given, we have 12 different cities in the United States that are all actively developing hackerspace projects. Hack Toronto. Wait, what was Toronto's hackerspace? Hack.to, hacklab.to. We have Kansas City, Texarkana. A lot of hackerspaces are in progress as a direct result of the first version of this talk. So without any further ado, I present to you Jens Oleg with Hackerspace Design Patterns. Give him a huge, huge round of applause.
Yeah, it's really an honor to be here for me. And I really feel like this is coming to a full circle. Like this whole thing started 1 year ago, and now the updated version of the talk that we prepared like 1 year ago is here at the last hope. So what I'm going to talk about is hackerspace design patterns and the catalog that we compiled for that. I will explain why we call it design patterns. But first I will just introduce myself and introduce the people behind this presentation, and then, yeah, the largest part of the presentation is actually the catalog that I will present. So there's just one person on stage right now, but there are many people behind this talk. Unfortunately, Lars Weiler Pylon of CCC Cologne couldn't make it. We were supposed to talk together, but at the last minute he received a very typical hacker electricity bill, so his ticket to Hope went away with that. Thorsten Haas, also of CCC Cologne, contributed many patents. I also exchanged ideas with Tim Pritlove of CCC Berlin, Paul Böhm. Yeah, Paul Böhm of MetaLab in Vienna unfortunately couldn't make it, but he also had some contributions to this talk, and many people from the CCC provided feedback. And of course the American hacker scene. We prepared this talk to present our experience of 10 or 15 years of building hackerspaces and putting it in one piece. Yeah, just because of that visit of American hackers. So you are also to thank for. My name is Jens Oleg. I know it's a weird name. It's a German version of Johannes, so would be John in English, but because it looks like a girl's name, like Jan, people give me free stuff online. When I'm one of the co-founders of the Chaos Computer Club in Cologne, in Germany. I'm still active there. I've been an activist for the CCC in general in Germany for more than 15 years now. And at one point I was the spokesperson for the CCC, talked to the press, talked to other organizations for them. I was a member on the board of the CCC, but yeah, for personal reasons I stopped doing that, but I still follow the organization very closely. I'm involved with the annual Chaos Communication Congress that takes place every year between Christmas and New Year. The CCC in Cologne was founded in 1997, and we have around 42 members. We don't actually know, but we think that 42 is a good number. It's a good random number. But around, 50, less than 50 people. And there are also people who technically are members but don't show up anymore. And we are currently in our 3.5th version of our hackerspace. Our first version was in a bar that we got hold of, but we later found out why we were able to get a lease for that bar, because the person who ran that bar was away on a state-sponsored holiday. And actually, we had lots of people turning up at our place asking where the new place to buy the Coke was. And we moved out of that place. And then found another place which was just too small, and then we had a new place, but we only used half of the space, and the other half was going to someone who actually lived there. And when that person moved out, our group was strong enough to just take over the whole space. So that's where we are now, and all the pictures in this presentation were taken at the C4 hackerspace, at the CCC Cologne hackerspace, which we abbreviate C4, like the plastic explosives. So, why did we compile this catalog? Yeah, just as Nick Farr has mentioned before, in August 2007, a group of North American hackers, I should say, not all of them were from the US, visited spaces in Germany and in Austria, mainly. And they actually wanted to know how the places that we have work, how these self-organized hacker labs work. And yeah, after the Case Communication Camp near Berlin, they just went around Europe, German-speaking Europe mainly, and visited a couple of these spaces. Every space did a little presentation on its history, and we were thinking about a good metaphor of sharing our experience with that thing, and we looked at design patterns. Design patterns, as most of you may know, are used in software engineering as a term for typical situations where you could apply one approach to a solution. And originally they come from urban planning, so a typical design pattern when planning out a city would be that you would somehow have to have a center for recreational things somewhere, and then you would put that pattern into use into your design. So what is different in this design pattern metaphor from, let's say, a cookbook metaphor, we don't think that giving you a step-by-step manual would work, because the circumstances are very different and you will run into very different problems depending on your environment. But rather we just want to provide a big box of Lego bricks where you can get out tested patterns and then build your own solution. Yeah. And of course your mileage may vary. So this is going to be the design patterns catalog. First group we called sustainability patterns. So when starting a hackerspace, you have a chicken and egg problem. Should you concentrate on the infrastructure or the projects? And our solutions to that is that everything should be infrastructure driven. You should have rooms and power and service, connectivity and other facilities first. And then once you have the infrastructure in place, people will come up with amazing projects that you didn't imagine in the first place. This thing that people will come up with things that you didn't imagine in the first place, this planning for the unexpected, is also something that you will see a lot of times when running your self-organized hacker lab. So yeah, this is a place where we have our network operations center in Cologne. Yeah, and many people, actually there's a talk about that tomorrow, excuses that people use for not opening a hackerspace. And one of the most often heard excuses is it really the time now to start your hackerspace? Shouldn't you wait? Have you really thought of all the problems? Some people spend a lot of time on designing very elaborate bylaws, or just going through every possible potential problem that they just might run into, and then nothing gets done. So we think that the time is right now, and it's always easier to ask forgiveness than to get permission. That's what Grace Hopper, one of the pioneers of computer science, said, who was also a US Navy Rear Admiral. It's very important to just start. Many of the problems you think of will vanish as soon as you get started. And when in doubt, just do it. And yeah, how can you communicate in such a group? We get asked that question, but we don't really understand why. because you're hackers and you should know what to do. You should stop slacking and set up a mailing list, a wiki, and an IRC channel, and you will need all three. Actually, you don't need these things that I just mentioned, but you have to think along the lines of what they provide as a platform. You will need a platform for discussion, maybe a mailing list, and you will need a storage for collaborative documentation. A wiki is a good idea, and maybe using MediaWiki, like the software that powers Wikipedia. And you will have to have something for real-time communication. IRC is one option, but you could also have an XMPP Jabber server and do nifty stuff. There is an implementation of Jabber server that lets you share all the rosters with all the members, so everyone who is in that group will be on each other's buddy lists. You will really need all these three things. Exchanging cell phone numbers can also help, but you need to have one platform where you do actual discussions and come to a conclusion, and mail seems to be that medium for that. You will have to document your stuff, and from time to time you have to do real-time communication. Most of the failed attempts at creating hackerspaces neglected one aspect or the other that I've seen. And also being alone doesn't help you. You want to set up a hackerspace in your city alone and you fail. We think that you need to reach a critical mass, and for us that rule of thumb is 2 + 2 persons. You need a partner to kick around the initial vision and exchange ideas about that vision that you have. And then you will need 2 more people in order to get real work done. Stuff like transporting physical items and stuff. And you shouldn't start before you have at least 4 people. And once you have that group of 4 people, it's easy to recruit more people because everyone has friends. And it seems like 10 people as a start is a good number for sustainable hackerspace to have. Most attempts that we've seen where hackerspaces really took off after they have reached that point of 10 people. And most failed attempts that we've seen was just one person in a city trying to do things on their own. And you would also have to need strong personalities. That's what we call that pattern. Nothing gets done. That's the problem. You all want the hackerspace, but it's so hard to get off your asses. You should look for strong personalities as members of your original group, people that have experience in building structures. And what I find most important is look for people who have authority and get respect, and not for people who use authority and get laughed at, especially in anti-authoritarian hacker circles. Okay, another infrastructure. You might say I have not properly Americanized slides, but I hope you don't mind. The landlord and neighborhood pattern is another pattern for infrastructure that we see. Maybe you think you have found the perfect hackerspace, but the landlord is somewhat weird and the neighbors are picky. You should really reconsider if that space is the perfect space for you, because we think you should choose wisely, and a benevolent but uninterested landlord and cool neighbors can be the decisive reason why the hackerspace takes off or not. Not so cool neighbors may call the cops at 2 a.m. Depending on your project, this may be a serious problem. As hackers, we do not live the majority lifestyle, and you should look for neighbors who are also weird and outside the majority. Let me tell you something about the neighbors we have at our hackerspace in Cologne, C4. We have our hackerspace next to a dominatrix studio. And this seems to work pretty well, because they're interested in privacy, and so we are. It used to be a problem like having young, unwashed computer people running around that line of waiting businessmen in front of our neighbors' doors, but we finally found a way to get around that. And also, I've heard that this just goes very well together. I think in America you say like chocolate and peanut butter. Other hackerspaces I know of in Karlsruhe, in southern Germany, they share a space with a, I think, gay youth organization or something. So just realize that you do not live inside the majority lifestyle, and having cool neighbors that also, yeah, are outside the majority. Yeah, that's a big point, I think. One question that always comes up is it's really, really expensive to pay for the space. So maybe that guy who's really cool could live in there, and we could just use that space, and or maybe we could be flat sharing and have a hacker space in that flat as well. And yeah, that always causes privacy problems. I don't think I've ever seen that to work out, and that's why our suggestion for that problem is that guests are really fine, but you just don't let anyone live there, and you should kick the people out if necessary. We've had some really bad experience with people just making that, yeah, the place where they lived, and in the end, yeah, privacy issues, like someone wants to bring over their girlfriend or whatever, it's just inevitable. It should be like the perfect living room, the hackerspace, without anyone living there, you know. Yeah, séparé, that's a word I made up because I couldn't possibly find an English word for that, so I took a French word. What you want to have is a well-structured hackerspace with rooms to chill, to discuss, or work in small groups. And when the main room is occupied, you want to have another place where you can go to and split the groups. Or this may be more of a European problem. You want to smoke a cigarette at the space without disturbing non-smokers, without disturbing non-smokers, or without disturbing non-smokers. Depends on what side you're on. So what we found was very practical. Have a hackerspace with smaller separate rooms, and you can use curtains or doors to separate them from the main room. And yeah, the smoking question seemed to come up in all the European hackerspaces I know of, and just having a smoker's room works for us. So this, on the bottom of the page, you can see how it is organized with smaller rooms that we have, with a main room and smaller rooms where groups can work in. Kitchen, as a human being you need food, and as a hacker you need caffeine and food at all times. So one solution for that problem would be to have a kitchen at your space. And we think nothing brings people together like cooking together. Have fridges for Clubmate. Selling soft drinks will help you raise money for the rent. Actually, most of the spaces I know of selling soft drinks is really a huge part of their budget and of how they finance their spaces. Sometimes maybe half of the money comes from selling drinks. And you should invest in the single most important piece of hardware, a dishwasher, because that will end so many discussions immediately. And you should have a freezer for pizzas and buy decent kitchen equipment, like really good knives and lots of pans and lots of pots. And you should show nerds how to cook real food. That's the kitchen we have in Cologne. And just a few weeks ago, we had a visitor from NYCResistor. Rose White was there, and she taught us how to make Louisiana-style gumbo, which was a nice experience. And yeah, having a nice, cozy hackerspace is an important thing. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. There must be something else in addition to just workstations and electronics. So I think you should equip your hackerspace accordingly. You should bring in couches, sofas, comfortable chairs, tables, ashtrays, ambient lights, stereo equipment, a projector, and video game consoles. Bringing in plants didn't work for us that well. Actually, I've heard that at the hackerspace in New York City, NYCResistor, there was a task force of 2 people who said, no, we don't think that's a natural law, like bringing in plants in hackerspaces won't work. So they tried and they failed. And yeah, that's one of the rooms that we have for just relaxing, discussing. That's a documentation of our tour plant, Igor.
It's because of the logo.
It may have something to do with the logo, yes, I don't know. Yeah. After long hacking sessions, you will start to smell funny, also gas to your space, sometimes neglect personal hygiene. So an obvious solution for that, and I think this is also like the gold standard for hackerspaces. We used to have a map of all the regional groups of the Chaos Computer Club in Germany and all the spaces they had, and they had a special pictogram if that space had a bathroom with a shower, and we think the discriminating hackerspace has a bathroom with a shower because that's like going the extra mile. After long hacking nights, you will have the best ideas while taking a shower. This has happened more than one time. Someone working on a project, and then at like 6 a.m. in the morning, they took a shower, and then suddenly the solution was there. Guests from other spaces may stay for several weeks or several days. Weeks probably not that wise, but several days. We call them au pair hackers. We have little boxes at our hackerspace where every member has a little box where you can put in hardware or letters that were sent to that, or parcels that were sent to the hackerspace. And there's also one box for au pair hackers, and in that box we keep extra keys for guests, and also we keep like random stuff like tickets for museums in Cologne, so they can do touristy stuff while they're visiting us. And if you really, really, really want to go for an extra effort, you can buy a washing machine to get rid of the smelly towels, which we did. And then later we also bought a dryer, but maybe we're overdoing that thing a bit. So that's our bathroom. Yes, most questions that people have are around that thing of how to finance the hackerspace. You need to pay your rent and utilities, and this is where really the regional differences come into. It's rather cheap for us in Germany to have a space like that, and I know it's almost impossible to have cheap rent in New York City or anywhere that you would want to live in New York City. So yeah, this is really where you cannot make a step-by-step manual, but you will have to find your own creative solutions, and people have come up with various solutions for that. But it basically boils down to that you have to have fees that you collect regularly. I've heard that if you don't have problems with the privacy issues, PayPal works very well because it will automatically collect the fees every month, and you don't have to run after people. Have you paid your fee this month? And so on. And you shouldn't make no exceptions ever. You should choose an appropriate amount. Like if you just say $200 per month, then I would say it's not appropriate because so many people simply wouldn't be able to afford that. You should also think about having discounts for students. We also thought about having discounts for people who are unemployed. So this is just something that you would have to discuss with your group. What we made as a rule, and what I think works very well, is have at least 3 months of rent on your account all the time, no exceptions, because that would really make you sleep easier. And you should elect a totalitarian treasurer. Someone, actually, I fell prey to the totalitarian treasurer just a month ago because I forgot to pay my fees, and then he sent me an email and I didn't reply, and then he outed me on our internal mailing list. It was horrible. Sponsorship is the one question I get asked a lot by Americans. We have made only negative experience with sponsorship, so we call it the sponsoring anti-pattern. Most people think it's a good idea to meet at a company that likes you, or maybe at a university where most of you study anyway. And I think I should stress that this is a really, really bad idea. You should never, ever depend your space on external sponsors. Donations are great when they come from companies, but you should remember that companies can go bankrupt, and when meeting at a university, you won't be a student forever. And also, it creates a kind of environment. Meeting at a university will exclude younger people, like high school kids, or people who don't like the university culture. And yeah, having a sponsorship from a company means several other problems. No company, no matter how nice, will give away presents forever without asking for favors in return. That's just capitalism. The next set of patterns that I want to introduce are all patterns that have to do with how to have regular meetings, organizational patterns. And if you want to have, if you want to resolve internal conflicts, exercise democratic decision making, and discuss recent issues and future plan, there's just one way to go. We call it plenum, which I was told is a very highbrow word in English, but it just means a meeting where everyone attends, a regular meeting with all members if possible. You should have an agenda and set goals, maybe discuss that agenda before that on your mailing list, and make people commit themselves to tasks. Like, yeah, we actually had a tradition of banning sentences that start with somebody should, or there should be something, or sometimes we should think about, and yeah, just banning that word should, and especially if it comes together with somebody. You should say stuff like, I will take care of this problem. You should write down the minutes of the meeting and post them on the mailing list or on the wiki. And yeah, you should go for the only date that works, which is once a week. I've seen so many hacker groups fail because they don't go for that only date that works, once a week, which everyone can remember. Ah, it's that day of the week. I will tell you later which day it is. It's that day of the week, so I have to go to the meeting tonight. Or I cannot go to the meeting tonight because I have an appointment, but that's no problem because I can go next week, and I will just meet the meeting this week. Weird dates like first full moon after the third Friday will never work, and anything like every other week won't work either, because people will just don't know. Is it this week, the meeting week, or is it next week? And what with months that have like 5 weeks in it? Just meet once a week. Meet on Tuesdays, because every weekday sucks. You will not find any day when every hacker can attend a meeting. Someone always has an appointment. So the solution we found for that was meet on Tuesdays. All days are equally bad. Just pick Tuesday, end of discussion.
We really meet on Tuesdays.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that comes from the history of the Chaos Computer Club. When the Chaos Computer Club was founded, it started with a little ad in an alternative daily newspaper where someone put up an ad saying hackers wanted, and they met at that office of that alternative newspaper, die Tageszeitung, and the only day that was available for a meeting of hackers in the 1980, imagine that. The only day that was available for them was Tuesday, so they met on Tuesday, and Tuesday is just a perfect day. Someone will say, oh, I cannot possibly come on Tuesday, I have this class on Tuesday. Yeah, but this is true for every other day in the week too. Also, this may change in a few months. Yeah, maybe that person doesn't have that class on Tuesday anymore, and then another person will have a problem with it Tuesday, but just stay with it. It's easier. And you will spare yourself a lot of needless discussions. Oh yeah. One thing that we do at our hackerspace is an event called Open Chaos. And we mainly do that to draw in new people and provide an interface to the outside world. We have a monthly public and open lecture, talk or workshop, which we announce on our website. And there's always interesting topics. Sometimes it's about privacy laws, or someone would talk about computer security stuff, or what you have. I think the last talk we had was on EEPC hacking, and the talk before that was on NYCResistor by a guest from the United States. And we also use that as a filter for bringing in new people to the group. We used to have very open meetings, and we would just announce on our website that our internal meetings are every Tuesday. And then we would get a bunch of weirdos, people with this glow in their eyes, and they would say things like, if we team up, like the CCC and myself, then we can really defeat the Illuminati. And yeah, didn't work out that well. So we have this open lecture every month where one can come, being a weirdo or not. And we just scout for interesting people, and if you think they are cool people, we just tell them, hey, you should come on Tuesday as well. And we don't tell the weirdos. Another thing that we do, and which will happen in a few months, is what we call U23. In Germany, this soccer championships have this, I think there's a U21 team, so everyone younger than 21, and we thought 23 was a better number. We wanted to draw in younger people, because the obvious problem you have after some years is older members graduate from college or get another job in a different city or get married. Basically, your space just needs fresh blood. What we do to solve that problem is we have a challenge for younger people that we set up for them in form of a course that spans several weeks. The first one we did was actually building robots with Lego Mindstorms, building a robot that would read in a barcode and then perform actions on that barcode. And then we also had a software project which was write a chat protocol, implement a chat protocol that would be hidden in ICMP packets. So the sysadmin at your school wouldn't see that you are using the network for chatting. And we tend to make that challenges a bit harder than it could be, it would be wise for a single person, because we actually want the people to work in teams. We provide tutoring, and we push them in the right direction as well, and we do a reference implementation of the project before that. But it's usually too hard for someone who's just in high school to do like Unix system programming on a network level for a chat server. So, but working in a group would work very well. And the result that we had with that was that all these posers and people talking big would vanish after week 2, because they found out that they actually had to work on something, that they actually had to do teamwork. And then we were left with the really smartest kids that finished the project. It's not a problem if they don't finish the project. The thing is that they learn something in that. And we should give them room to experiment. And after that, you can retire after the team building and let the smartest of the young ones run the space. And this is actually what we do in Cologne. I mean, I go there regularly to have a Clubmate or hack on projects, but yeah, I mean, just the young ones, they run it actually, and I'm glad for that. This is a problem that comes in after some years. If you're building a hackerspace now, you may not see it, but you will see it in the near future. You did everything right, and you had some big events, like maybe a con at your hackerspace or at your town, and you had a nice time, you did projects, but after some time the enthusiasm goes away, and your projects are stagnating. This will eventually happen, without exception. And we've actually found a pattern for that. We think that peak enthusiasm at a hackerspace has the form of a sine curve with a cycle duration of 4 years. So like at first everyone is really, really energetic about everything, and then it will slowly go down, and then yeah, after 4 years amazing things will happen again. But you should remember to keep your hackerspace running, even if the feel-good factor is temporarily on holiday. Chances are good that your space will be awesome again in 2 years or so. You shouldn't give up. And always prepare for the unexpected. Maybe a new exciting member will knock on your door tomorrow. And this actually happened at a space in Bochum, where a lot of people who were much into computer security and into programming were running a space, and then at some point someone asked them, hey, do you do electronics as well, soldering and stuff? And they said, no, we were just coding away and trying to find bugs in security things. And he said, well, I could teach you how to solder and how to build electronic projects. And that totally transformed that hackerspace, Das Labor in Bochum, which is now full of blinking things and yeah, basically they do nothing else but microcontroller programming and building projects with electronics. So even if you didn't have that idea in mind and you always thought of your hackerspace as having, you know, a stress on that aspect of hacker culture, things may change in the future. And yeah, changes are good, that they will change for the better, even if at the moment you don't have that enthusiasm that you used to have. Conflict resolution is a very important problem. I've seen a lot of drama at a lot of hackerspaces and a lot of screaming and yelling. And I know that many people find these catalog of design patterns impressive, but actually it's not that impressive if you look at the stories behind it, because we did every stupid mistake we could, and then we just wrote down what worked for us. So you don't have to do all the stupid mistakes that we did. So keep that in mind if you think, wow, how did they come up with that? It's because we were stupid. One thing of how to resolve how to resolve problems at your hackerspace would go for consensus. If you need to make a group decision and want to make sure that no one gets left behind, you use that weekly plenum for discussions, and you shouldn't take votes, discuss until everyone agrees. And we think for some problems this pattern is the best. Second best maybe is democracy. You need to make a group decision. Discussion does not seem to lead you anywhere. Again, a typical example is, should our hackerspace be smoke-free or should we have exceptions? Everyone has a strong opinion on that, and you cannot really find a consensus, but you can see what the majority of the group thinks. You should use the weekly plenum for discussion, and if you see, okay, this can only be resolved through plain old democracy, then the strongest minority wins over the weaker minorities, and for some problems this pattern is the best. And last but not least, the command pattern. The problem you have is nobody does the dishes, your hackerspace looks crappy, no one seems to care. Then you should implement this conflict resolution pattern. You should order people to do the dishes, take out the trash, keep the infrastructure up and running, yell if necessary, but you should always participate. Just, you know, screaming and ordering people won't help you, but you should participate. For some problems, this pattern is the best. You see, they all contradict each other, and you will have to experiment which pattern to apply to what situation. This is a name that I stole from a hackerspace which is currently not in existence but in planning state. NYCResistor in San Francisco, on their mailing list, they had the very, very nice word pseudo-leadership. And because I think good ideas deserve to be stolen, I stole it. The problem that you may run into, especially if you have this strong personality pattern implemented, you have a community of like-minded people, or you started out as that, but suddenly you find yourself in a dictatorship run by a single hacker. This is not what happened at NYCResistor, of course, but they were thinking about how to prevent such a situation. And they came up with that very, very clever name, pseudo-leadership. You should not have ranks. Of course, if you incorporate the organization that runs your hackerspace, you must have, theoretically, on the paper, someone who is head of that organization, or whatever the legal framework in your country is. But you shouldn't pay too much attention to that. You should not have an officer of blah, 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 or whatever. You should use leadership just temporarily, like for projects, when someone has to say, okay, we need a van to go to that place now. I want you to drive that van. But you should not have a single root account on your hackerspace. Self-organize, that's the point. Responsibility, yeah, that's a problem I see a lot of times. You volunteered for the task of running a critical piece of infrastructure, for instance, the mail server, but you feel the sudden urge to slack. And how to get around that problem is just to remember that just because volunteer work doesn't get paid doesn't mean it's less important. Remember that you would directly hurt your friends and the hackerspace if you let them down. Take pride in your volunteer work. It will make you grow stronger as a person, and it's satisfying. When you realize that you really cannot do the job anymore, your last task is to hand it over. Debate culture. You are in the middle of your weekly plenum, everyone's yelling, nothing gets done. That's a problem as we see very often, and we think that's because many geeks have very poor debate skills, which is the result of years of flame wars on the net. We think you should make people with actual social skills lead the discussions, and we have found out that those with a background in real-life political works, like student council, were best for our groups. They were used to working with agendas and meeting minutes and having a list of speakers and calling people to order and stuff and moderating the group discussion. And it's actually a skill that you can learn, just like learning a new programming language. You can learn from people who know how to discuss things, and you can learn not to interrupt others. It's worthwhile learning it. Yeah, this is something that may be familiar to FreeBSD hackers. We call it the bike shed anti-pattern. And it sounds complicated, but it's a problem that I'm sure everyone in this room has seen. You suggest creating something for your new hackerspace, like a bike shed, but everybody is now talking about the bike shed's color, and then no bike shed will be built. It's a known problem. if you suggest something that anyone in your hackerspace can build, they will take part in the discussion, especially if it's only the color of the bike shed, the design of the T-shirts, the Linux distribution on the servers, etc., etc. Nerds tend to discuss trivial problems in epic detail, while more complex tasks will be ignored. And you should just identify pointless discussions like these and end them. For instance, as a hypothetical case, you're discussing uses for a laser at your hackerspace, but the laser is not there already and you don't have an idea how to finance that. So maybe going back and saying, okay, I think this discussion is somewhat pointless if we don't even know how to get that laser yet, would be a good idea. So the bike shed problem actually comes from a book. There's even a website on that problem, bike shed. It comes from a book, Parkinson. He wrote a book in the early 1960s called Parkinson Laws, which contains insight into the dynamics of management. In the specific example involving the bike shed, the other vital component was an atomic power plant. I guess that illustrates the age of the book. Parkinson shows how you can go into the board of directors and get approval for building a multi-million or even billion-dollar atomic power plant, but if you want to build a bike shed, you will be tangled up in endless discussion, and everyone wants to leave their fingerprint on it and said, you know, the color of that I chose. But if you propose something really complex and something really huge, like this atomic power plant, people would just go along and say, yeah, I don't know much about that. I guess they thought about it earlier, so I shouldn't say anything about that. Sometimes people cause a problem that cannot be resolved in the groups. People are just causing troubles. We call this the private talk pattern, which we found very effective if some experienced member of the group would talk to the troublemaker in private and listen to that person and let them know how the group feels about the problem without exposing them in front of the group. This is actually something that you could do to prevent drama and flame fests on your mailing list. Just talk to the person in private. So then we have some miscellaneous patterns. Old hardware. People always bring in new hardware, but yeah, at some point your hackerspace just becomes a hardware museum filled with junk. You should create a pile or stack where you put old, unused hardware, let everyone take from that. Anything left after a month should be thrown away, but you should make sure you announce that step not only once, but at least 3 times using an escalation system. And being Germans, we put that into a law. It's in German, I'm sorry, but I will translate it. So that's the law about providing hardware in the Chaos Lab. The Chaos Lab is a environment of extraordinary order and tidiness, where the Chaos Computer Club Cologne does their work. We define cleaning up personnel as person who care about the state of the club room, and cleaning up personnel always has a hero status and immunity against hostile attacks of owners of not functional hardware, etc., etc. It goes on a while. So this is our stack of old hardware we have. If you need a monitor, you could just grab one, and after some time we just throw them out. We define non-functional hardware as every hardware where we don't know what function it has, where there is no contact address printed on it, where there is no root password known, where we possibly couldn't imagine any use for that. And Also, if it's like just collecting dust in the corner and has not been switched on in like 2 months, it may be considered as non-functional. And we have to be that strict because it's, yeah, you will turn your hackerspace into a hardware museum really, really quickly if you don't take that extreme measurements. Keys, you want to have your hackerspace accessible all the time. You don't want to call someone else during the night to lock the hackerspace when you leave. The solution for that is hand out keys, track who owns a key, make a list, have a good lock so that nobody can copy the key without your permission. Well, it depends on where you live, but at least we have that in Germany. And you should collect a deposit for the key so that the owner takes care of it. Or you could also build a complicated electronic locking system with cards and RFIDs, and yeah, then you will have all the cool benefits and all the messy problems that come with that. But we think that just plain old hardware keys work the best. And yeah, you want to raise funds, you want to stay up longer at night. This is a problem that you can solve with buying at least 1 pallet of Clubmate and selling it in your hackerspace, and you will realize the results very soon. This is some of the mate we keep in our hackerspace. Let me just stress that this is not a step-by-step manual. There's more than one way to build your hackerspace, and based on your backgrounds, there may be a couple of patterns which match, and some patterns even contradict each other. You should be creative, you should experiment, and above all, you should start your own hackerspace or go to your nearest hackerspace. This is a very, very incomplete list of hackerspaces that I've seen. Just before that conference, my friend Paul Böhm, Enki from Vienna, started hackerspaces.org, which is going to be a starting point for organizing hackerspaces worldwide, which will have a huge list of hackerspaces around the world. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions, or I already took too much time, right? Okay, then just a short announcement. I think tomorrow at 3 p.m. There will be a workshop downstairs, down the elevator, and that area which is the Hackerspace Village. And if you have any specific questions, you should just go there and find me, and we can talk about that. Thank you very much.